The dream is coming true. I get hurt. I tear my PCL.
Oh, hell no. That's tough.
Maybe I should train to MMA.
Do I even have a future in this?
I don't know what we did wrong. We got to really figure things out with you. I don't know if this is going to work out.
Is The Rock a complete liar? Or is he just losing track of his history? Dwayne Johnson, also known as The Rock, was recently on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he got into talking about how at one point in his life he wanted to fight for Pride FC, which, if you're uninitiated, it's an MMA promotion that used to exist over in Japan. But before I start to talk about some of the people who are trying to debunk his stories, let's actually hear what the man has to say.
The dream is coming true. Like, this is it, man. I finally feel like this is what I was born to do. And man, it's feeling so fucking good. Guys in the locker room, everybody taking me under their wing. There's some political that you always want to stay away from. I've always stayed away from that, but for the most part, everybody's supportive, because even though it's a cutthroat business backstage, you still need some guys, you know, who are going to show you the way. So I wound up becoming the youngest Intercontinental Champion, beating Triple H, or he let me beat him.
Right.
Everything was doing this. So at that time, this interesting thing was happening in the world of pro wrestling, where it was fans were cheering the heels and anti-authority, the boss, led by Stone Cold Steve Austin, giving everybody the bird. Vince McMahon, fans were loving that, gravitating towards this.
Stone Cold Steve Austin's my favorite wrestler. I idolized him growing up in the Attitude Era, if you will. That's what he's referring to. There was a shift that happened from the mid-90s to the late 90s, that Attitude Era shift, which in my opinion is the greatest era in pro wrestling history.
That guy drives a pickup truck, drinks a beer, tells everybody to go themselves. Now, in wrestling world, that's supposed to be a bad guy, but now he's becoming a hero. Then you have this kid who's 25, who's coming out. Here we go, you know, getting old school. And Vince and the company always told me, hey, you can't smile enough. I was like, what do you mean? You go out, you smile. I want to make sure everybody knows you're grateful. Gratitude of attitude. And I said, no, okay. And it started not to feel good to me, because I said, well, so, you know, these nights I'm getting beat, but I still want you to smile anyway. So you have this thing happening over here, the rise of the Attitude Era. And then you have this kid who's just smiling away. Everything is good, even when he loses. It never felt right to me here. And then fans started to turn. Booing every night. Got to a point, dude, going into my first WrestleMania, Chicago, I'll never forget it. Every night they were chanting Rocky sucks. And I had to smile through it.
Oh, hell no, that's tough. Listen, I understand being a pro wrestler, it's live action acting, it's physical drama, it's a soap opera with clotheslines, but that's gotta hurt, right? Because you've cultivated this personality and now you have fans booing you and you're supposed to be the fucking good guy. That's gotta be tough.
Bosses were telling me, no, you gotta smile. No, keep smiling, ignore it, just ignore it. You're paying your hard-earned money as a fan, even though this world is fiction and it's not real. The best of the wrestlers always came from a real place. So I was smiling away. I get to WrestleMania, Chicago, sold out. Stone Cold Steve Austin's on top in the main event. I'm defending my title. WrestleMania, 20,000 people start chanting Rocky sucks. So imagine that. You're a kid, 25 years old. You got the belt on you, pressure. You're in there. And the guy who I was wrestling, the Sultan, who was actually my cousin, Rikishi.
Who remembers Rikishi? What was Rikishi's finishing move? Drop it in the comments below. It's hilarious. It has to do with his butt, by the way.
Whole arena's chanting Rocky sucks. He's whispering to me, don't listen to him. Don't listen to him. Now I'm like, this is my life now.
Right.
We get out of the match. I go backstage. Vince looks at me and Pat and just says, I don't know what we did wrong, but we have to make a change. I know what that means.
It means you guys gotta like this video. Damn, best segue so far in a long time anyway.
2 days later, I drop the belt to somebody else. Now I'm getting beat every night, and then I get hurt. I tear my PCL, wrestling a guy named Mick Foley. Now by this time it's May. Vince says, you take time off, heal your knee. I don't know what we did wrong or where we went wrong, but we gotta really figure things out with you. I don't know if this is gonna work out. Oof. Yeah, man. And this is 1997, summer of 97. You'll appreciate this part. In 97, during that time, while I was still going out to LA and working out, we were crossing all the MMA guys.
Okay, so that was the backstory that you needed to know. This is where The Rock was at this time during his professional wrestling career. So you can see psychologically, emotionally where he's at. And now he's gonna get into where the sort of bug for wanting to fight in MMA came from. So let's see what his timeline looks like, and then we'll get into the people who are trying to debunk him.
Pride just opened up in Japan. So I was seeing all these MMA guys going over to Pride. You remember that time, right? I think you might have been with UFC at that time, right?
Yeah.
At that time, I was making $150,000 wrestling 235 days a year. So do the math of that. And how much you're making per match. We start hearing, hey, these guys over in Pride are making 250, 350, 500. And I thought then, I don't think I'm going to make it in WWE. People are booing me out of the arenas. I can't be myself. They're telling me to fucking smile. I don't want to fucking smile. It's not who I am. I start talking to Ken Shamrock at that time, who's wrestling with us. I run into Mark Kerr. I start talking to him. He told me a little bit about Pride. And I have this idea in my head. Maybe I should train to MMA and go to Pride and make money, real money. And then I don't have to smile. I'm sure I'm going to get up over there and then knock one of my lungs loose, but maybe I could do something like that. Find the right coach and train. So I had this whole thing in my head. I was talking to him. I said, I think that's the way to go because those guys are paying real money and these fans are booing me over here for 150 grand. I get a call from Vince and he says, how's your knee? I said, it's healing up. I don't tell him about this idea after I've talked to Shamrock and Kerr and all these guys. He goes, I want to try and bring you back one time, see how it works out. I want to turn you heel. And we have a faction called the Nation of Domination, who DC loves, by the way. That was his favorite, Daniel, the Black Militant Group. He goes, I want to have you join them and we'll see how it works out. I come in. I said, okay, but I still got this MMA thought in my head. Again, I just want to make money and I want to be myself.
Right.
When I get to the arena that night, I'm going to join the Nation. I went to Vince, and at that time, there was only just 2 hours of live show, Monday Night Raw. Now there's 6 hours of show on 2 different programs. So I said to Vince, hey, tonight when I go out there, could I just have 2 minutes on the microphone? And he's like, I don't know. He goes, it's live. You know, all our time's accounted for, allocated. I said, I just need 2 minutes. He goes, why? I said, I just want to be real and just tell the fans how I feel. And I feel like I need to recalibrate things here. He said, fine. A minute. You got. Great. Get on the microphone. Now I'm walking out. They're booing me. Rocky sucks. But now I'm a heel with this heel group. I grab the microphone and I say something like, listen, I'm a lot of things.
But sucks isn't one of them.
And joining the Nation isn't a white thing. It's not a black thing.
Hey, that's not a black thing. It's not a white thing.
It's a me kicking your thing. And I'm going to earn this respect one way or the other. Dude, that was the most freeing thing for me in my career. It was like, you know how you have these defining moments? Even in that one little moment, I was just ripping all this open. Saying, here I am. Now you can boo me, but now watch how I respond. I'm going to be real.
Now you don't have to smile anymore.
I don't the smiling. I'll smile when I want to smile.
Right.
But now watch how I can respond. Watch my words now. Watch my actions. The fans felt something that night. Within a month, I became the hottest heel in WWE.
Wow.
All right, so it's a beautiful story by The Rock. You have this moment where he's questioning his entire career, not for the first time, because if you remember, he comes from football, so he had to quit on that dream, which is a childhood dream of his, go to pro wrestling, which was his father's path. His father was a famous wrestler in the 80s, to then have this moment where he's like, do I even have a future in this? My dad didn't want me to be a pro wrestler. I went against his word and now I'm failing at that. So he started to look for alternative options, which in this case was MMA for The Rock. Fortunately enough for him, Vince gave him the okay to turn heel. He's a master on the mic and he only got better. And obviously the rest is history. The Rock is The Rock. But let's get into the timeline about his talk of MMA. You know how MMA guys are, and fans of MMA are very specific about anyone who talks about the sport. So this is the first tweet that you'll find. The first Pride was in October of 1997. If you remember The Rock, he was saying this whole debacle was happening in 97 for him. He was considering going over to Pride. Fedor had his first Pride fight in 2002. I mean, I don't know how that's relevant because he didn't bring up Fedor at all. Ken Shamrock, mentioned here, which is relevant, had his first Pride fight in 2000, which is true. Fight fans are picking this whole timeline apart. For Johnson to have contemplated fighting that year, he would have needed awareness of Pride since its beginning. Kerr had his first Pride fight in 1998. Shamrock debuted in 2000. At first glance, Johnson's timeline just doesn't add up. So again, if The Rock is running into Kerr and Shamrock in LA, they're talking about Pride. Why would they be talking about Pride if Ken Shamrock is still in the WWE, if I'm not mistaken, and he hadn't yet went over to Pride for another 3 years? Kerr, who's really a legend in Pride, if you're not aware, didn't actually start fighting for Pride till a year after the inaugural event. So obviously there's a little bit of a timeline dispute there. And you got this gentleman here saying, was WWF champion 2 years after his debut. Stop with the hard luck story. You were never going to do MMA. That's the thing. A lot of people get on The Rock because, as I said before, he got a call with Pat Patterson, which is not easy to do. Pat Patterson at the time, I believe, was like the vice president of the WWF, which is obviously a high-ranking position within the organization. And because he had a dad who was a famous wrestler, he was able to get that call, get those opportunities. So he kind of came in with a little bit of support, a lot of support, I should say. To go from a wrestler who has no name to being a seminal performer in the ring in 2 years to be a champion and to be world renowned is remarkable. And obviously there's a lot of support and a lot of push in the professional wrestling career. Wrestlers are made based on the support they get from the organization and other wrestlers. Obviously his connections were a great fortune for him. Meltzer says he's turning into Hogan with these stories. Yeah, you were just gonna train for a bit and then take on Fry, Severn, the Gracies, Goodrich, Taktarov, Kirk, Chemo, etc. And in 1997, they had their first event. And by the end of 98, they'd only had done 3 more shows. Let's check out some of the comments to see what fans are saying. This is another big issue. So check this out. Who were the American pro wrestlers making big money and pride in 97 and 98? Outside of guys like obviously Dan Severn and Shamrock, who went over to the WWF because there was no money in fighting at the time, MMA. That would have been the discrepancy. But see, there's a contradiction there. So why would they be telling him about this money that could be made over in MMA, whether it's in America fighting for the UFC or Pride, if at the time Pride really wasn't giving out big contracts? They were wrestling again because there was no money in MMA at the time. Rocky Maivia, who was The Rock's original character with the floppy hair that he was referring to, debuted in Madison Square Garden. He was giving the Intercontinental title immediately. There's never been a more clear and obvious success story from the minute he showed up. He was never leaving. So obviously people aren't buying his story, but actually it goes a little bit deeper. So apparently in 2017, The Rock put out a post that stated that he was actually going to fight in MMA in 2007. He stated in this post that his goal was to link up with Greg Jackson as his coach and for 2 full years to just train. Now, let's do a little backstory here. In 2007, Greg Jackson became part of the Winklejohn Academy and they established Jackson Wink MMA Academy. But it wasn't until 2009 that Jackson actually started getting the accolades and getting noticed for what we consider him to be, which is an elite trainer. So obviously, The Rock tells tall tales. Now there's a parallel being made between him and Hogan. If this seems to be a reoccurring theme with The Rock, he obviously loves MMA and he's a massively successful person, right? We're not throwing shots at, one of the GOATs, but he is telling a tall tale. Now, here's the thing. There's either 2 things happening here. Either he's catering to his audience, which in his mind are masculine men who like to work out, who are pro wrestling fans and MMA fans. He does have that crossover appeal. So he's trying to tell tall tales to gain favor with them. That's one. Number 2 is he's twice my age, so he's older. I don't remember things I said 10 years ago or that I did 5 years ago. This guy is so famous and he's been so famous since the 90s. So is it likely that maybe he got his dates mixed up, something to that effect? I wouldn't be shocked if maybe he thought 97 was 99 or if he thought he saw Ken Shamrock, but he really had a conversation with Ken Shamrock in 2002 about the fight he had in 2000. Ideas, names, goals, aspirations get mixed up. We start plugging in ideas to fill out a story. Like really think about a view of The Rock and what you would have experienced, the amount of women you've been with, the amount of success you've had, the amount of money you've made, the amount of dinner parties you've had. It must be ridiculous. So I don't really know what to think of this. I'm sort of leaning towards the fact that he's probably telling tall tales to bolster himself up with a little mix of just the old memories starting to give out. But I'd like to know what you guys think. Is The Rock just another Hulk Hogan in terms of he's telling these miraculous, insane tales that never were actually true? Or do you think there's some validity to it? As always, if you're new to the channel or if you haven't yet signed up, check out the linked comment below. It's my mailing list. The main purpose of that newsletter is to help you guys with your habits and your discipline. So if you're in a position where you feel like maybe you're lacking a little bit in that area, feel free to check it out. As always, Strangle Gang, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next one.